Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to be visiting with Dan Mazur. Dan has one of those interesting stories I've come across. I asked him if he would come on the pod and talk about his story, his books, and he graciously agreed to do so. Dan, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Could you tell the listeners a little bit about your professional background?
Okay, my current professional background is I'm in the IT business. You can probably tell from the literal background. So I'm an IT consultant. I have an IT company here in Miami. I've been doing that for about 20 years here. I don't really consider myself an author. I do what I feel compelled to do. And I felt compelled to write my first book, which compelled me to write my second one. How's that? Is that enough for starters?
It's enough for a starter, but let's dive into that a little bit.
Uh,
You started writing, as I understand it, without the idea of a book in mind. You started writing for Dan. Could you tell us about that part of your journey? What were you trying to work through, and how did writing help you?
so we're going like this. Okay, I started writing in 87, in about February. It was the same month I don't know what Jim's a way of really saying this, but things are what they are, right? When I was released from a mental institution, okay, I had some psychological difficulties. I don't know if you ever had a drug problem. I have never had a drug problem, but I lost control of my mind.
How
And
about
one thing in that, though, one thing I didn't lose control of is the understanding that I lost control of my mind. So I was told about several avenues to get it back. And the only one that seemed to work was something I felt compelled to do on my own, which was to write and rediscover myself through introspection. So that's what I started to write in February of 1987. And I've been writing, well, to complete my first book for 36 years, which finished shortly after I learned of the passing of my father, who died about 3 years ago. So it looked like I had an ending to this compilation of thoughts and ideas that took shape, took form, and turned into a book.
so? Was this a dialogue with yourself that you were recording? Was it a recitation or recordation of facts? All of the above? None of the above?
As much as I could get my hands on, imagine 36 years of time of just writing, did a lot of writing, total introspection. I think that I've craved dialogue all my life. I don't come from a background that was very open, where a conversation was encouraged. It was more a lifestyle of kind of do as you're told and don't stir anything up, follow suit, don't embarrass us, that kind of a thing. But for whatever reason, I was always the kind of person that craved understanding. And I didn't like doing things because I was told or just following another, even for the sake of comfort, which kind of was a choice I was at a few number of different times. But it was just complete introspection. It was something I felt I had to do on my own. I tried talking with other people. To be kind of frank, no one would really talk about me, especially the topics that I was interested in talking about. They were pretty taboo. So I really didn't have anyone else, any other place to go, any other forum to do it. So I wrote. And there's something about writing when you put words on paper, especially when you're being brutally honest with yourself and you're trying to not write for joy or comfort, but to learn and discover things, looks different when you revisit it days after and you start taking what can appear to be like chunks or they come pieces of a puzzle and you put them together and they turn into something and they make and
So did that lead to sort of aha moments for you about either why something happened, why you are the way you are, or you're able to connect those dots together?
I'm not walking around wondering why I'm drooling and just following whatever occurs to me at the moment. I seem to have gotten control of my mind again. I had a business when that happened in 1987. I was able to return to my business and function. I was fortunate enough to have an aunt and an uncle that cared about me and they took charge, just took control of the situation and talked to my employees, my staff, and got involved in the work for me. And they continued so until I was able to function again. But in time, it's not like I got I became better in 2 or 3 months, but then again, it's not like I became fully functional again in 36 years. I became functional enough to participate in the business after a few months. really took about 4 or 5 years before I was really my usual self again. It took quite a while.
Would you call this something akin to journaling, or was it something different?
You tell me, I'm not a writer. I just wrote. It's akin to who I am and my tendencies to dive into wherever my mind goes and hit it. Um, it's a memoir. I imagine I wrote a memoir. It's an introspective journey. And okay. And as it is 36 years long, it's also a journal of those entire 36 years. So not only did I start off with, I went to the beginning. I went back as far as I could think to go, like back to my parents' childhood. And I started digging there. I figured whatever impact they had on me had to be related to whatever had impacted them. I started like that and started writing about that, what little I was told about my parents' family and what I heard about how he was treated as a child and how he was raised. And I went from there to what I know about my family. And I kept doing that until I caught up to the present. And I found it extremely informative. I learned a lot more about in that process of why people do some things that they do. But it was really just a complete process of total questioning everything. I was disappointed in myself for living many years with a lot of assumptions, just assuming things because it was pretty much expected of me. That's the way I was raised. And I had to break things down. And that kind of was the rebirth I went through when I got out of the mental hospital, because I got to a point where I said I was to myself that I was willing to give up everything in exchange for just having my mind back. I would have given up everything, relationships, any type of financial accumulation, whatever, if I could just think again. I thought about that so many times. I don't know how to explain something like that to people. If you haven't gotten to a point where you literally don't have the opportunity to control your thoughts. Like right now I'm speaking with you and I can think about what it is I want to say and plan ahead and navigate through it. But what is it like for that to be completely gone? I don't know. Can you imagine such a thing?
I will explain why after we conclude our podcast, but I absolutely understand what
Okay.
that means.
Say why, and maybe you've had experience that, or you have some knowledge from education about it. I mean, whatever. I like to do. Tell me.
We'll go with the former on that. But
Sorry.
you wrote this memoir,
Yeah.
and then you actually moved to what you've characterized, or at least has been characterized to me, as an introspective novel. How were you able to move, or rather, this journey? Maybe it's the journey you're on. What did the novel do for the journey you're on?
Yeah. I imagine it's all part of the same thing in that in the book, the memoir Core Values, which is an acronym, by the way. I don't know if you gathered that. It's not CORE, it's COR, which is for comfort over reality, as I say it, right? But through those 36 years of introspection, for some reason, I believe I learned some things, right? In certain ways, I got my life back together and I've been doing fairly well. And I really wanted to pass it along to other people that are close to me. And I tried different vehicles to do that. And one of the vehicles that I turned to, I don't know why I did, because it never was successful in the past. And that was simply dialogue with people, right? So I imagine people aren't very comfortable, no matter how you put it, when the message coming across to them is, look at what we've been doing all these years is wrong. We need to do these things differently, right? So I've had 36 years of writing, and at the end of it, when I completed the book, to think about these things I've learned and that I've accumulated to advance my own life and do and accomplish some things with. How can I get this? I'd really like to get this out to some other people, right? Through the process of writing and reading, I've kind of discovered the power of storytelling, right? There's an interesting power in that. And there's some interesting dynamics at play that I think, at least that's what I've experienced. Because people can read stories and they can both take themselves out of situations and put them in it. So if the story is written in such a way that maybe it's not linear, where it's just written for entertainment or enthusiasm or to just spike interest. But if it's written such a way that maybe even my first book was written, my memoir, which is kind of jumping all over the place. It's not linear. It's past, it's present. It's I'm thinking about this and this moment reminds me of this other moment in the past. It's kind of all over the place. So if it's written such a way that relates to in the process of introspection, instead of engaging someone in a story that's just fantasy or just interesting, I wanted to see if I could write it in a way that would engage the reader in a process, right? In a process where they can take stories and they can relate them to their own life and not have answers, but maybe have more questions. I would like people to realize the value of questioning, which was something that I was never taught. I think people should really understand, and also understand that quite often it isn't the answer that's important. And quite often there aren't necessarily answers, especially the ones you're seeking, right? But the journey of life, I think it's more about the questions and finding the right questions and exploring them and giving yourself permission to have questions about anything. Why not? Why let someone else define you when you can go through experiences and define yourself? Why not gain true autonomy? Why not find out who you are and become that rather than, because if you don't, the way I've seen so many things go, other people will fill in the gaps. They'll define you for you. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, so going to move to your themes of faith, religion, a higher power, whatever you might choose to call it. First of all, how did you intertwine those issues within in your novel? And then how have they helped you personally in your journey?
They're my life. My life was about faith. My father, he passed 3 years ago. He was a pastor of a church, and I was raised in a very religious environment. Now, the story Beyond the Morning Light, which we're here to talk about today, the character, the father of Eldon, I can't even remember his name, Clayton. Clayton was his name and the character in the book. Now, he was a businessman. He wasn't a pastor in the book, but the same dynamics were at play in this character, which is very parallel to my own personal story. And my father did have his own business at one time. And when I was 11 or 12, he left the business and started the church. But all the same dynamics were in play. And he had a position of control and power. And he was passing that, using those dynamics in the family and in the church. So faith, I was raised in such a way that I was expected to just accept the faith that was handed down to me. I was expected to conform to that. And not doing that and questioning faith created a great problem between me and my family. Because now questioning the faith meant that, what is this? You're not a Christian. You're not this particular type of Christian we expect you to be. And that was a very big problem for me and my family. And as time went by and I saw more and more that was going on in my family in this faith, I simply decided that from what I see, this isn't really where I wanted to go. And with all the confusion I saw in so many elements within my family, within the dynamics of the religion and the church and all these different things, I just wanted to step out of that. And I wasn't being accepted for doing that. So I was ultimately excommunicated from the family for not being part of the faith, because it did boil down to the church having had started with cousins of mine that were all related to my mother. My father married a woman. My mother was 17 when he met her. He was 20. The year after that, they got married. My mother's the very nurturing type. My father's very much the person's all business. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And my father, I believe, was very drawn to the warmth and the associations my mother had with her relatives and all. And it was all of the cousins that started the church initially. And to keep this as short as possible, the cousins started the board in the church. Then one by one, they were leaving, let's just say, the church. And they were eventually all gone. My father had full control of the church, which was growing and growing. And then it came down to my grandparents, my next relatives that were next to go. They were told to leave the church. They were thrown out of the church. And I went to my father when I found out about this, and I says, Dad, what's going on here? And I told him pretty much to look at, hey, this dad, when our cousins went, they were told to leave. I just went along with it, said I didn't say anything. But now my mother's parents, who I've been raised with since I was a very young child, okay, I'll fall in line. But all you got to do is tell me who they sold drugs to, who one of them molested, what they've been stealing. Give me something that can justify this extreme measure of you expecting me not to have anything to do with them anymore. And he couldn't give me anything. So my siblings, my four siblings, they all fell in line. They cut off my grandparents, but I couldn't do it. And so it took about 3 months, and I knew it was coming, and I was told to leave. And so that was in about 1985. And so for 3 years, I thought it would blow over. I thought calm, sensible minds would eventually prevail, and we could all get together and talk, because this is ridiculous, right? I thought for sure they're going to see through this. We're family. I'm your son. I'm dad. I'm my brother's brother. But I call my sister up. I call my brother up. I call my mother up, and they all give me the same response. I would say that, look I'm your son. I'm your brother. Let's go to dinner. Let's stay in touch. And with every single one of them, it was, we can't, not until you get things right with dad first. And I would be like, let that be between me and him. Those are things we need to work. No, we can't have anything to do with you. So I still thought things would work out. And I thought that and tried to work things out for 3 years. And then I realized that I'm not who I thought I was. I lost the existential crisis, right? I didn't know who I was. My identity was gone. So I started writing stuff on the chalkboards of my clients' chalkboards and all this stuff. And I started losing it. I started doing some very crazy things. I lost control of my mind, and I became involuntarily committed. And that was that. I told you I eventually got out. And to get out too, there was a real spark of hope, though, when I was in the institution, in that the doctors had told me that it was essential that they get together with my father and myself. And I was really looking forward to that, because I'm like, oh my God, now we're going to have a dialogue. We're actually going to talk about these problems, and then we're going to work through them, but we're going to find a resolution. But my father refused to appear for that. However, when I was an outpatient and I was supposed to seek counsel, like for someone to see once a week for a while, my father, there was a gentleman, his name is Dr. Master Leo, that was a member of the church. And he asked him to come see me. So I went and I saw Dr. Master Leo, and I sat with him for the first consultation. And I said, okay, so my father told you that maybe you could be the person to do this for me. You could be my psychologist to deal with this. And I says, I'll tell you what, I'll agree to see you on one condition, actually 2 conditions. I said, how bad off am I? Am I really bad off? Am I in serious trouble here? And he said, I've talked to your father. I've talked to Hutchinson Psychiatric Center, some of the people there. And look, while I was there, I took a dive through a window. I tried to kill myself while I was in the institution. I was in a little bit of trouble. Maybe I wouldn't make it if who knows, didn't get some kind of help, right? So he says, look, yes, it's very dire. It's very serious. You need psychiatric help. It's really serious, Dr. Masterfield. Yeah, you mean like I might not make it kind of serious? Look, Danny, if you don't get some help, you might not make it. You might not be around much longer. I says, okay. He says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I says, I'll come see you on 2 conditions. He's like, what's that? I says, number 1, you tell my father what you told me, how important this is. He sent you here, right? And if you tell him that this is kind of a matter of life and death, you're telling me. He says, yes. Okay. What's the second condition? He says, the second condition is that he pay half your fee. I told him, right? Now, okay, so maybe I lied to you earlier. Maybe I said I was out of my mind, but I was conscious of, at least of the idea that I needed to get my mind back and work on that. There's something else I was evidently conscious of too. And that is the kind of person my father was, because I knew he wouldn't go for that. I knew this was a play to, and I guess there's no real need to get much into that, but I told him that. It says, if he's willing to pay half of the fee, then I'll see you. He says, okay. So we left. I got my coat departed, came back the next week, sat with him. And he says, okay, did you, Dr. Masterlity, did you speak with my father? He says, yes. I says, did you tell him what I had told you? That you had told me there's a matter of life in it? Yes. I said, told him all of that. He says, okay. Now, did you ask him if he would pay half my fee? And that if he did that I would see you? Yes, I told him. I said, what did he say? He said he won't do it. I said, okay, well, it was nice meeting you. Got my coat, left. And that's about as close as I got to therapy. After all that, I just went to writing. And that seemed to produced some fruit, seemed to help me. I just continued with that. And I never stopped because I seem to keep learning from that. I've kept learning from that from 36 years till I close the book. And now I'm still doing it because I see the value in dialogue. And I wrote this book with the intention of hopefully I can show others the value in dialogue, the value in questioning, the value in not pushing things under the rug and being able and willing to talk about anything, the importance of that.
As we move to the end, could you tell us a little bit about your journey to find
Intellectual independence. Intellectual in what sense? Like where I've learned from philosophy or
learning that you can think differently than you were perhaps taught, raised, or conformed
Sure.
into?
I've learned that independence, independent thinking, critical thinking, I think from the outside and how I had seen it at one time was it appears very nice. It looks good. It looks grand, but there's a price. There's a price in that because there's isolation. There's a great chance that others might not perceive things as you, which was far more than likely for me. And then you have to face a lot of unknown. There's comfort in conformity. You know what to expect. You know what you need to do to fit in. You start breaking away from that, then there's a lot of unknown you have to face. And if was ever anything else I wanted to encourage people about in this second book is to have the courage to face uncertainty. I think that's where the best parts of life are. Predictability isn't so grand. But autonomy, true autonomy, attempting true autonomy to really desire to think on your own and to not have your identity defined for you, it's a trip.
Dan, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you or find out more about you or your writing, and of course, buy your books, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Our book, Core Values, this is the original one here. You can find this on Amazon by putting in my name, Daniel Mazur, Daniel Mazur. It comes up. Or you can go to corevalues.net. Everything is there. Yeah, corevalues.net covers it. We covered both books. Here's the other book, Beyond the Morning Light. I don't think you've seen these. It's bad with the light or whatever, but
It works.
Yeah, so that's the other book. Same place as Amazon. And on corevalues.net, there's an email spot there. Anyone who calls there, right? We can have my phone number. Call anytime. Happy to talk with anyone and everyone.
Dan, I want to congratulate you on your journey, and I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with me today. And I cut you off, so what did you want to say?
If you don't have the time to say it now, I'm not learning anything about you. I would like to ask you really quick, Kirk or Picard?
Oh, Kirk.
Of course. Why Kirk for you?
That was the Star Trek I grew up with.
Yeah, and it got me out of doing the dishes when I was a teenager.
Yeah. So
One more quick thing. Did you ever get back on the bicycle?
it shredded my legs, and about the furthest I can ride now is 20 miles. In the summer, I ride when I can ride early in the morning when there's no traffic, but I can't do any kind of distance anymore.
Sorry to hear. And just lastly, I'm much more comfortable talking with other people about them than myself. So next time, or hopefully sometime, I can learn more about you. We can have a more regular type of conversation that I'm used to. I like dialogue. I don't like talking about myself too much.
Well, Dan, thanks. We will continue this conversation.
All right, Tom. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you and others. Okay.